Good afternoon, this is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding, here to discuss the basics of how offshore banks are starting to freeze certain accounts of certain U.S. account holders. Is that something you really have to worry about, and is there a way around it? So, from a baseline perspective, you're a U.S. person, which means you're a U.S. citizen, legal permanent resident, or foreign national who meets the substantial presence test, and you've got foreign accounts, and these foreign accounts meet the threshold for reporting depending on what category of asset or account or investment you have. You've got a reporting requirement. Some of the common forms you'll hear about are things like the FBAR, FATCA, Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, Form 8938. Then there's a bunch more complicated forms like the 8621. These different forms have different filing due dates, days that you have to submit the form, so it's important that you check to make sure that you get that part of it right. But what happens when you haven't reported, let's say, and your offshore bank or your foreign financial institution goes ahead and sends you a notice saying, hey, are you a U.S. person? And this is a predicament that a lot of people get in. As a quick aside, the IRS doesn't really distinguish between international, foreign, and offshore. Offshore tends to conjure up visions of sipping martinis overseas. That it just means it's out of the U.S. Abroad, overseas, offshore, international is 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other when you're dealing with the IRS. So a lot of times what happens is since the past 5 to 10 years, many countries have entered into FATCA agreements. FATCA is the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. More than 110 countries, 300,000 foreign financial institutions have entered into these IGAs or intergovernmental agreements with the U.S. government. As a result of these different agreements, a lot of the institutions begin reporting. They will update the U.S. government as to U.S. account holders who have accounts at one of their institutions. Sometimes the bank may not be sure whether or not a person is actually a U.S. person or not. So what they'll do is they'll send out a FATCA letter or a KYC letter basically saying, hey, certify whether you're a U.S. person or whether you're a foreign person, non-resident alien. And if you're a U.S. person, you fill out W-9. If you're not, it's W-8-BEN. With the W-9, the bank gets that document, sends it over, processes it, and then uses that information to send over the information about your account to the U.S. government. If it's a W-8-BEN, that's what non-U.S. persons fill out, and so then there's nothing really that the person has to worry about. A big concern becomes for the U.S. person, well, I really don't want to give my information to the bank. Well, what can the bank do, right? Well, these days the bank can do a lot. One thing they can do is that they can close or freeze the account. Generally, they're not going to close the account if you don't respond to the first letter, but if one or two of these letters come and the deadlines come and go, then the bank can freeze the account. And if the account's frozen, the U.S. account holder doesn't have the opportunity to access that money. Now, the next thing is if the U.S. person doesn't respond to the letter, then oftentimes there's a presumption, especially if there's any other data to implicate that the person is a U.S. person. The assumption from the bank is, hey, we don't want any trouble with the U.S. We're just going to assume if someone hasn't responded that they're a U.S. person, and they're going to report that to the U.S. government. So that can cause two problems. One, the first problem would be that the U.S. person can't access their account, right? Because it's frozen. The second is now not only can they access their account, but the U.S. government may end up getting the information, which may make it difficult for the U.S. account holder to apply for one of the amnesty programs if they need that money in order to submit payment for the penalty or for taxes due. In addition, what happens is sometimes these foreign institutions, after they freeze the bank, if you don't respond to the letter, they send that information to the IRS, and then the person is audited, they're examined. Depending on how that goes, the person might be subject to a special agent investigation if the U.S. government believes that the person knowingly was trying to avoid reporting. Let me give you two common examples, okay? sometimes what'll happen is the person will have, let's say they're in a foreign country and they use their foreign ID to open the account. Several years later, they become a U.S. person, right? That bank may be sending out a bunch of these KYC or FATCA letters to different customers, and then this person gets one. Well, the bank may have no indication that the person's actually a U.S. person. There may not be any social security number, any address in the U.S. or anything like that. On the flip side, a person may be a U.S. person already, go to the foreign country and open the account with a foreign ID, but the bank is somewhat suspicious that the person may actually be a U.S. person. They may identify it in their records and then send that information over to the U.S. government. So it's important to try to get the best feel that you can as to whether the bank really thinks you're a U.S. person or if they're just going through the motions. If you're worried about one of these foreign banks freezing your account and you want to get into compliance, the IRS has various amnesty programs available. There's voluntary disclosure, streamlined domestic, streamlined foreign, delinquency, and reasonable cause. We have lots of resources available on our main website, goldinglawyers.com. If you think it's appropriate, you can reach out and schedule a reduced fee initial consultation with our firm. Again, my name is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.